Welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, D.C. not only has a new school superintendent, it's home to a mushrooming charter school movement. We'll talk with one of the movement's leaders, Ariana Quiñones-Miranda. Before Fahrenheit 9/11, there was Hearts and Minds. Well, that 1974 Academy Award winner has been restored and re-released. Filmmaker Peter Davis joins our Howard Cohn to talk about cinema, Vietnam, and Iraq. Also on the Coffee House, Reuben Jackson reviews two notable books by notable local authors. Queen, The Life and Times of Dinah Washington by Nadine Cohodas, and Hard Revolution by George Pelecanos. We've got Jambalaya, the Hank Williams variety, with the U-Liners, introducing a new segment, The Willing Spirit. Our Reverend Heather Kirk-Davidoff visits a pastor with the Sligo Adventist Church, which recently hosted a gathering of over 1,000 local church social activists. And we've got poetry by Adriane Harjo and Rose Solari. Welcome to the forum at the Coffee House. When it comes to public school choice, Virginia and Maryland are tardy followers of the national trend. At last count, Virginia had but 9 charter schools enrolling fewer than 1,500 students statewide, and Maryland had just 1 charter school with fewer than 200 students. Contrast that with the District of Columbia, 42 charter schools and more being certified every year. Charters already account for nearly 1 in 5 public school students in D.C. Now I repeat, public school students. Don't confuse charter schools with vouchers, a tuition subsidy to attend private schools. So what is a charter school? What makes it different than other public schools, and are they successful? With us is Ariana Quiñones-Miranda, Executive Director of the D.C. Public Charter School Association. Welcome, Ariana, to the Coffee House.
Thank you.
Why are people attracted to charter schools?
Well, in DC, a lot of it is because they haven't been satisfied with the traditional public schools, or for newer parents, they've heard the horror stories about the DC public schools and they're hesitant to enroll their kids there.
Mm-hmm. And give us a sense of the breadth and the diversity of the educational models that fall within the rubric of charter schools.
Well, in DC, like you mentioned, there are 42 schools and 42 charters, but they're actually operating on 52 different campuses, and we have almost as many models. But I would say there's nothing really so new under the sun. What charter schools tend to do is that they look at models that have been successful in other places, and they try to bring those here to the district. So we have everything from bilingual Montessori schools that start with 3-year-olds to an adult education program that targets primarily immigrants. We have a youth build charter school that just got approved and should open next year. We've got a boarding school that serves middle school students. So there's really quite an array of schools.
Who charters the charter schools, and how are they governed?
In DC, we have 2 authorities. There is the Board of Ed, which has the opportunity to charter up to 10 schools every year, and also the DC Public Charter School Board, which also can charter up to 10 schools a year.
And the governance of these schools?
All of the schools are nonprofit organizations, and they have their own board of directors. So that board is ultimately responsible for the operations of the school and the academic performance of the school. But those schools are monitored by those 2 chartering authorities.
And how are they funded?
They're funded from the DC government, so they get public funds, and they get the same amount that the DC public schools get to educate students.
You've had some trouble securing and maintaining facilities, haven't you? Explain that.
That's a big challenge in DC. We have a really tight real estate market. One of the things that we're working on now is to try to work with DCPS as they lose enrollment. They've got some vacancies in the schools, so we're trying to figure out partnerships where we can either co-locate charter schools in some of that excess space, or we can work out lease agreements for the buildings that are entirely empty. It's not an easy process, but we're hopeful about it. The alternative is for charter schools to find commercial space. And because of the tight real estate market, it's very costly. So there are some charter schools that pay over $1 million a year just for their lease space.
Charter schools were authorized first in 1996 in DC, is that right?
The law was passed in 95 and I guess implemented in 96, and we had our first charter schools open in 97.
So it's a short history, but according to most of the people who work in the charter movement, I understand that they think that 5 to 6 years is when you begin to see the realization of a charter school's capacity. Nationally, there have been studies that have indicated that charter schools are actually underperforming other public schools. How are the DC schools doing?
The DC schools are doing pretty well, considering the challenges that they have in basically starting up a new business. What we find are two things. If you look at just the raw scores and standardized tests, the scores don't look very high in most cases.
Now, when you say not very high, is that compared to where they began, or is that compared to other DC public schools?
That's compared strictly to other DC public schools, because what acts like the No Child Left Behind Act don't require is for the schools to track their growth gains. So they're only looking at a test score from one day. Once it's kind of a snapshot of one moment in time, and so it doesn't show how that same student did the year before. So if we look at raw scores, we still have some room to improve, especially at the high school level, because we have students that enter the charter schools pretty far behind, and they don't have a lot of years to make up for that.
Give us a sense of what that gap is.
Let's see. There's a wide range in the charter schools. Some have less than 20% of the students that are proficient, and others have over 90% of the students that are proficient. But what we're seeing is the most success in the elementary schools, where the students are enrolling at a young age, and so they're actually not behind yet at all, because we get a fresh start with those students, and so we're seeing very good progress. But we're seeing some challenges at the high school level.
One of the things that people have noted also is that even if the charters are underperforming the standard public schools, that there seems to still be a high level of parental support for the charters. Parents seem to prefer them still to the public schools. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, what we can say is that even though the raw scores don't look as strong as they could be, that the growth gains, when we do track those growth gains, that charter schools tend to have students outperforming their peers in the traditional public schools. So that's a good sign, because we know that
I'm not sure I follow that. Explain that concept.
Well, if you're only looking at a test score from, say I took the test this week and I scored maybe a 50% on it. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not good enough if we're looking for students to score 80%. But if I was at 30% last year and I made up 20 points in 1 year, and
in other words, they might still be trailing the performance of the DC public school students, but they're gaining at a faster rate.
Exactly.
Okay. Of course, if you start way down, you're going to gain at a faster rate too.
Well, as long as the academic program is solid. The flip side of that, in terms of looking at test scores, is also looking at what are the other kinds of services and supports that the charter school provides. And what we're finding is that because they have smaller environments, that it's a more welcoming place for families and for students. So we do see better parent participation. We also see higher attendance rates by students and lower discipline incidences.
You're talking now compared to the DC public schools, mm-hmm. or compared to the history of the charters?
Compared to the traditional DC public schools.
Talk a little bit about how charters are different in terms of the rules that apply to charter schools and why they can function differently.
They're not so different from the rules. The biggest difference is probably that they just don't have to deal with the central office of DCPS. So because they have their own board, they report to that board, and not the Board of Education. But
there's no union, right?
There's no union,
and
right?
There's
so
no requirement of certification, is that right?
Right, there's no requirement of certification, so they have more autonomy. But NCLB, the No Child Left Behind Act, still applies. The charter school students still have to take the same standardized test as the students in the regular, mm-hmm. public schools. So a lot of those sort of federal mandates apply across the board.
And what is the kind of teacher-student ratio in the charters?
It tends to be smaller, but again, it varies. We have some charters that are probably 10 to 1. A lot of them shoot for 20 to 1 or less. Somewhere between 15 to 1 to 20 to 1 is probably average.
Mm-hmm. And although we said that there's no requirement of certification, I'm sure that some of the teachers are certified. What percentage of the teachers are certified?
I don't know exactly that percentage, but I can tell you with No Child Left Behind, more and more of those teachers will become certified just because of the pressures. Although highly qualified, the definition of that doesn't mean that a teacher has to be certified, but they do have to have a bachelor's degree, and they do have to have content area knowledge. So they either had to have majored in the subject that they're teaching in undergrad, or have a graduate degree in that subject matter, or they have to pass the praxis and the praxis too.
Critics Some critics of the charter schools would say that we know what works in public schools. That's smaller class sizes and really skillful teachers. Would you disagree with that?
No, I think that's absolutely true.
If that's the case, they would also argue that charters sap the public schools of resources because on a per capita basis, every child that moves to a charter, that per capita support goes to the charter and then part of the overhead as well. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would say that I think it's important for the money to follow the child, and that's what's happening here. So yes, the district is losing that money, but they also have fewer students to educate. And what we've seen in DC is that as their enrollment has decreased, their annual budget has actually increased. So they're not losing money overall, but there probably are some questions about how they are using the funds that they have. You know, the other thing I would say is that if the school district isn't educating its children appropriately, then should we keep all of that money in that pot? I think there's a reason that charter schools are so popular, and even with legislators, because we can see that the charter schools are
And one of the things about a charter is that if they fail, or they're considered to fail, they lose their charter,
Exactly.
at least theoretically. How many schools have lost their charter in DC?
About six schools, and most of those have been closed by the Board of Education. A couple schools have closed voluntarily because they knew that they had some problems.
Now, were these mostly financial problems or were they educational problems?
Mostly financial problems, and in some ways it's because it's easier to track those problems earlier on. For the academic issues to surface, it takes a little bit longer because we have to wait till the end of the year to see test scores and wait and find out. So most of the schools that have had financial problems also weren't doing so well academically, but the financial problems were caught first.
Okay, let me ask you about an inherent contradiction in what I think is the sometimes grouped together are the notions of charter schools and standards of learning as all part of this new approach to education. On the one hand, you have charters, which is sort of like let 100 flowers bloom, on the one hand. On the other side of that, you have the standards of learning, which is a little bit like back to basics. And we're going to teach to the test for math and reading, and you have to perform at this certain level or you're out. Aren't these inherently contradictory trends that are all attempting to act together to solve our education problems?
Well, yeah, but I guess if you have 1,000 flowers blooming, they're not all going to be of the same variety. So that's one of the things that charter schools allows.
But don't charters really have to do the same things in order to meet the standards of learning?
They have to meet the same standards, but they can get there in a variety of ways. So we know that students have different learning styles, and now there's been so much talk about multiple intelligences. So that's one of the nice things about charter schools, is that there really is no cookie cutter approach, and they can tailor their academic program to different needs and try to target different types of students.
Many thanks to Ariana Quiñones-Miranda of the DC Public Charter School Association for joining us in the coffee house. With so many children being left behind, the need for creative, alternative public educational models is self-evident. As the charter school movement spreads, expect the debate to sharpen over whether charters are pointing to more effective public educational models or sucking the lifeblood from existing public schools. I'm Mark Cohen, and this has been Coffee House Forum. Thanks.
Thank you.
He is frail, skeleton body, under ghost white skin with the blue-green veins pushing their way through. Yellowed vampire canine teeth barely touching his tightly drawn lips, sunken heroin eyes peering through orange, flame hair. But it's his brother who's really on fire, that sodomizing pickpocket thief in the night, sucking on souls the way you might hard butterscotch candy, tearing up hearts like paper die-cut valentines. I give in to their disease. I give in to them both. He was the lover I always wanted but could never hold. He was working double shifts to cover triple shots daily. He was wearing long sleeves while I wore a long face, while he was with his true love when he named their baby after me. His brother was to be looking after me while the other was at work. His brother was even on a television talk show 14 years later, and I remembered his brother bearing down on me with threats of violence, death, or worse. His brother didn't listen to tears or screams or no, please don't. I give in to their disease. I give in to them both. Their father was sitting in the living room, chain-smoking cigarettes, cheating at solitaire. Their father sat with a little glass of water, drinking vodka from the bottle. Their father was unfrayed by the screaming or the tearing of the window screen near the bed. Their father had selective hearing, tuning out what he chose to ignore. And when I stopped for a moment, staring blankly at cards strewn across the table, and when I ran past him out the front door, down the stairs, and into the street, and when I didn't know where I was until I realized I was in the shower at home, and when I finally understood that I could never scrub away the scent or touch from my skin, I gave in to their disease. I had given in to them all.
Hi, and welcome to a second look at the Coffee House. Before Michael Moore, before Fahrenheit 9/11, there was another emotionally charged war and another hard-hitting film. The war was Vietnam, the film was Hearts and Minds. Well, it's back out in the theaters. It's been restored to its original color, but it's as impressive and controversial as ever. The filmmaker was Peter Davis. There are obvious differences between Vietnam and Iraq, but there are also striking parallels. And let's start with that. To what extent is history repeating itself here?
I think that Iraq and Vietnam are far more different as countries than they are similar. I mean, just the emblem of that is look at them. I mean, the Iraq I went to last year was practically all desert outside the principal cities, whereas Vietnam is this lush country with forests and jungles and mountainous and so forth.
That's through the lens of a cinematographer, I guess.
Well, I hope a writer. I also wrote about Vietnam last year, and I wrote a great deal about Iraq. I think that the parallel is not them, but us. It's we who seem to be repeating ourselves in going to war against a country that poses no imminent threat to us, probably no even eventual threat, but certainly no imminent threat. We flew into both wars on the wings of lies, really. The lie about the Tonkin Gulf incidents in Vietnam, and the lie about weapons of mass destruction, and the, I won't call it a lie exactly, but the very misleading misinformation about the weapons of mass destruction, coupled with this charge that Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden, who hate each other, were somehow linked and somehow collaborating against us.
Michael Moore has paid you just about every compliment in the book, and he's, in fact, essentially said that your movie inspired his whole career. But what inspired you? Why did you start this movie? Were you an activist?
No. I was certainly not an activist. I was a broadcast journalist yearning to be a filmmaker. And the last broadcast documentary I made was called The Selling of the Pentagon. During the making of The Selling of the Pentagon, which was broadcast in 1971, I began to see the outlines of what we were doing in Vietnam, not only to the Vietnamese, but to our own people. The way we were being led and misled into a war that was a no-win situation. And it's often called a quagmire. To me, both of these wars are more like bear traps. We've got our foot stuck in that desert in Iraq now, and we had our foot stuck in the forests of Vietnam, and we didn't know how to pull it out. That's what I saw when I was making The Selling of the Pentagon.
And so did you take a gamble and just decide to make the definitive documentary about Vietnam?
It's for other people to say whether it's definitive or not.
We have a short clip of the film. Let's take a look.
Almost everybody has blown off firecrackers. The thrill you get when you see something explode as a child, or even as an adult almost. You put something in a can and watch the can blow up or blow up in the air. And the excitement, the sense of excitement, you know, especially if you're getting shot at, is just incredible.
You get in there and have a real good mission, hit your target right on, find out later that your target was totally destroyed. In other words, it wasn't one of these misses or almost, you got it, bang, it's down. And come back, make a night carrier landing recovery, that's fantastic. To say it's thrilling, yes, it's deeply satisfying.
So it's finally finished then in 1974, but when you try to get it distributed in the theaters, there were great difficulties, and I'm wondering, 30 years later, same difficulties or
no? No. Reintroducing Hearts and Minds, as you put it, has been much simpler. The Rialto company, well, first of all, the Motion Picture Academy came forward about 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, and began to lovingly and meticulously restore Hearts and Minds to its original best self. I'm just talking about visually and in terms of the sound also. They just did an enormous amount of work on both the soundtrack and the picture. And then Rialto Company came to me this summer, this last summer of 2004, and said, we'd like to re-release it. So that's wonderful.
So was that decision connected to Iraq and Fahrenheit 9/11, or just because it was available now in great fine fettle?
I think it had something to do with both. Certainly it had to do with the war in Iraq. I guess I could thank President Bush for the re-release of Hearts and Minds, and it certainly also had to do with the fact that nonfiction films, very much led by Fahrenheit 9/11, are finding an audience these days.
And what's the audience for Hearts and Minds these days? Old geezers like me?
Oh, I hope not. Oh, in fact, you know, I was just in Brazil, Howard, and they showed a number of my films, but Hearts and Minds was one of them, and there wasn't anybody in the audience over 30. I mean, that I could see. They all looked like they could be my kids, and their response really was heartening, really was gratifying. They said, "Are you guys in America going through the same thing again?" And they reminded me forcefully of the statement by the philosopher George Santayana, those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. Well, I think we did learn from Vietnam. I think we learned quite well not to go to war in places where our really most vital interests, where we were not threatened. But 9/11 was this great traumatic blow, and it seemed to cause amnesia.
Separate times, separate places, but can you give us a comparison of Fahrenheit 9/11 and Hearts and Minds in the context of their own separate times?
I think that the impact of Fahrenheit 9/11 can't really be compared to the impact of any other film, documentary, or fiction that's been released in this country in my lifetime. It's been an amazing wake-up call for many, many thousands of people. And it's also been a sobering film for many people to see who were just kind of not thinking about the current administration and what it's doing. Hearts and Minds was released when the war was already winding down, if you can possibly speak about a war winding down. But American troops were almost all out of Vietnam. Not when I filmed there, but by the time the film was released 2 years later. And so it seems to me that Hearts and Minds' principal impact was on an audience interested in learning something about what we had just been through. Whereas Fahrenheit's impact is on people who are saying, is this what we want to do with our lives? And so seeing Hearts and Minds, though, against the backdrop of the war in Iraq, which is why I hope young people will come to see it, gives an audience, I'm being told by a lot of people, a different perspective on the present.
Let me ask you about John Kerry. Were you surprised that his Vietnam War record, when it came up, became such a controversy as part of the presidential campaign?
I don't think anybody should be surprised by anything Karl Rove decides to do. But in this case, I thought John Kerry was a patriot both ways. You know, he's accused of being a flip-flopper, but I think actually what he did was evolve as reality evolved, as history evolved. He went to war as a patriot and fought the war, apparently very bravely. I don't know anything about him. I don't know the man. And then came home and decided that this was the wrong war now. We should not be fighting this war. So he turned against the war, and I think he was patriotically against it. I've heard people say on the right-wing talk radio shows, you know, that John Kerry cost a lot of lives, a lot of American lives. I think just the contrary. I think he saved a lot of American lives. The peace movement helped. I didn't make a film about the peace movement, by the way, but the peace movement quite obviously helped end the war a bit earlier than it might otherwise have ended.
But there was a visceral reaction to that controversy on both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 30 years later
And
that visceral reaction comes back.
That's true. People are still fighting the war 30 years later, and they're saying, oh, it was right, we should have just gone the last mile. Or people were saying, oh, it was wrong, we never should have gotten involved. And they're coming at each other again. And I think that the re-release of Hearts and Minds, I hope, will help give people on both sides of that argument a little bit of perspective.
Well, I want to say, when I saw it 30 years ago, I had a tremendously visceral reaction, and I suspect people seeing it today will have that same reaction. Thank you, Peter Davis, author and filmmaker extraordinaire, for being with us at the Coffee House.
Thank you.
If you get a chance, absolutely go and see this movie. It's a great, great documentary. I'm Howard Cohn, and this has been A Second Look.
Welcome to Writer's Block at the Coffee House, where we're featuring reviews of two recently published books by Nadine Cohodas and George Pelecanos, both of whom reside in the Washington area. Cohodas' Queen is the first full-length biography of the legendary singer Dinah Washington, whose personal life was as bittersweet as her recordings of standards such as What a Difference a Day Makes and Unforgettable. And though Cohodas' writing is occasionally waylaid by a dry, overly academic tone, she does an exemplary job of documenting the rise of the Chicago-born vocalist and in providing the reader with a sense of her enormous popularity, especially in the African-American community. Cohodas should also be commended for avoiding the bloodless, just the facts approach, which has marred countless jazz biographies. The sensitive, sensual, insecure, and generous sides of Dinah Washington rise from Queen's pages like melodies from that still memorable voice. When Jimi Hendrix penned the line, "Good and evil lay side by side" back in 1968, could he have foreseen the always arresting fusion of these elements in the novels of George Pelecanos, who has been dubbed the Emile Zola of contemporary crime fiction by critics? Longtime readers of Pelecanos will be pleased to learn that the always intriguing middle-aged private investigator Derek Strange returns in Hard Revolution, much of which takes place before and during the 1968 riots following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. But Revolution particularly shines in its opening chapters, wherein the author masterfully introduces Derek and other central characters. For in addition to the deft descriptions of the aforementioned, Pelecanos takes the reader in and around Washington, D.C. circa 1959 with its sleepy southern patina and shifting racial dynamics. This is not the Chamber of Commerce version of the capital city. Revolution captures D.C.'s quirks and contradictions, all of which help shape the novel's characters in a way historians and sociologists would and should envy. But its riveting, unsettling plot and conclusion resonate far beyond the Beltway. In a world of cliché-laden fiction, Hard Revolution is a welcome and much-needed antidote. I'm Reuben Jackson, and this has been Writer's Block.
Walking boss, you're the boss, but I don't belong to you. No, I belong, yeah, I belong, and I can get along with that steel driving crew. Well, I asked that boss for a job, said I want a job. He said, son, what can you do? Yeah, I can line track, I can line up track, yeah, I can pull a jack, I can pick and shovel too. Walking boss, you're the boss, but I don't belong to you. Yeah, I belong, and I can get along with that steel driving crew. Yeah, I work one day, one hard day, draw no pay, just go lay around the shanty too. Walking boss, you're the boss, but I don't belong to you. Walking boss, you're the boss, but I don't belong to you. I belong, yeah, I belong, and I can get along with the steel driving
Welcome, U-liners, to the Coffee House, the musical tradition segment of the Coffee House. Joe U-line, welcome.
Thank you.
I gather that song was called Walking Boss.
That's right.
You might want to use this mic here.
Yeah,
Walking Boss. I gather also that for you, singing about a walking boss isn't so unusual. Your life is largely involved with issues of labor and music, isn't that right?
Yeah, and this song in particular, I worked a lot of construction, and they had, you know, the kind of bosses who knew nothing, but they just walked around and made sure they were looking at everybody all the time. And that's why, walking boss, and those were, the bosses who knew about the work, that was one thing. But these walking bosses, that's another thing.
Well, these folks know about their music. Tell us about this group.
Well, this is a great group of pickers, as you can hear, and I met Avril Smith, who plays the guitar at the Tacoma Park Folk Festival last year. So we started to jam a bit and brought the rest of these players together to do a mixture of what we call roots rock music, which is sort of all the forms of music that help come together and form rock and roll, bluegrass, country, folk, rock and roll, obviously, blues, R&B, swing, the whole bit. And also because I've played, labor and work songs my whole life, we have a sort of a special niche and love for that kind of music.
What are you going to take us out with?
We're going to do a classic roots tune, a Hank Williams song called Jambalaya.
Let's hear it.
Goodbye, Joe, me gotta go, me oh my oh. Me gotta go, pull the pirogue down the bayou. My Avon, sweet as one, me oh my oh, oh. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. With jambalaya, crawfish pie, and a filet gumbo. 'Cause tonight I'm gonna see Mama share a meal. Big guitar, fill through jar and be gay. Oh, son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Let's play it. Tippy door, found no place is buzzing. Kinfolk come to see Yvonne by the dozen. Dress in style, go all wild, me oh my oh, oh. Son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Wet jambalaya, crawfish pie, filet gumbo. 'Cause tonight I'm gonna see Mama share a meal. Big guitar, fill through jar and be gay. Oh, son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Settle down, far from town, get me a pirogue, and I'll catch all the fish in the bayou. I'll swap my mom to buy Yvonne what you need. Oh, son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Wet jambalaya, crawfish pie, filet gumbo. 'Cause tonight see Mama share a meal. The guitar, fill through jar and be gay. Oh, son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou. Well, son of a gun, we're gonna have big fun on the bayou.
Because of their size and the shape of their ears, and the sweetness and wisdom she claimed to see in their miraculously lashed eyes, my mother, for as long as I can remember, loved elephants. At the zoo, she would linger chuckling before their house, the babies in particular seeming to hold some charm for her, their wrinkled legs belying their years. Someone in cruelty had called her an elephant once when she was a girl because of her size, which she could not control, despite a diet of not much more than cigarettes and overperked coffee. Perhaps her fondness for those creatures started then, a way of turning the pain around, as after her death I would tell my friends that it was easier to love my mother now that she'd lost the burden of her body. When she began to collect them, china, brass, and seashell, carved into the tops of wooden or pewter boxes, blown out of glass, it was a relief to all of us, I think, to have something to give this woman who almost no gift could please. Now she had found one small, true thing that could never fail her. Regardless of value, she adored them all, arrayed them across the piano, her dresser, the windowsills, as if like guard dogs they marked the perimeters of her turf. She hardly went out at all by then. The cough that embarrassed her children, rising as it would at all the worst moments, kept her at home. And then the oxygen, of course, those last years of hers attached to a metal tank. Long after the dusting and polishing had become an impossible chore, we still brought them to her like flowers, like a language without anger that we had found at last to speak. The weekend after my mother's funeral, I drove to the beach, thinking I might uncover at the meeting of sand and water better words than the priest who mispronounced her name had used to say goodbye. It was May and raining, though each morning of those 3 days I put on my bathing suit and wore it beneath my clothes, as if desire alone could change the weather. On the last night, with no answers yet to whisper into the emptiness you feel when your best enemy has fallen to infinite silence, I went for one more walk on shore and threw into the waves the last present I'd given my mother, a small silver elephant, its trunk raised up like a greeting, like a promise of something better, not only rest and peace, but please, I prayed some happiness for that woman whose heart, so bruised by time and sorrow, might yet, in another life, be healed by joy.
Welcome to The Willing Spirit at the Coffee House. I'm Heather Kirk-Davidoff, and I'll be hosting this new segment focused on the life and the leaders of religious communities in the greater DC area. I've been an ordained minister for 10 years now, but I'm still constantly learning about how religious communities work and how they can change people and how they can change their neighborhoods. There's some amazing things happening inside the churches and synagogues, the temples and mosques all over our neighborhoods, and I look forward to exploring some of these things with you over the coming year. One of the most amazing things I've seen this fall happened on October 13th at the Sligo Church of Seventh-day Adventists in Tacoma Park. That night, there were over 1,000 people. Jews and Catholics and Baptists and Presbyterians and Adventists and a bunch of other folks too, all singing and praying and cheering together. They were all members of Action in Montgomery, AIM, and they had come to express their religious convictions in a pretty unusual way.
My name is Baron Young, pastor of Allen Chapel, African Methodist Episcopal Church. This event is a social action effort on behalf of 28 congregations of different denominations within Montgomery County. We've been having one-on-one meetings, house meetings, to listen to our congregation, to hear what social, what political, what economic concerns they have. What's on our mind tonight is AIM's agenda, which is housing for working class families and an end to some of the Herculean tasks that immigrants have to go through to process in this country.
I'm here with Rebecca Brillhart, who's the pastor for discipleship at the Sligo Church. As one of the leaders of the AIM event we just saw in the video, Pastor Brillhart is helping her church make a difference in their community. Welcome to the Coffee House.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I was wondering if you could just start us off by telling us a little bit about what that night on October 13th was like for you. I know you were one of the leaders of that event.
It was truly our privilege as Sligo Seventh-day Adventist Church to host such a tremendous event, bringing 28 congregations together to address the needs of our community. And part of that community involved some of our own membership. So it was very exciting to have worked on such an event and an action for a whole year and to finally see it come together.
I know that there were over 1,000 people in your sanctuary that night. How many of those folks were from your congregation?
Well, we could say that about 260 of the total were from our congregation. We have a very large congregation, though. It's about 3,000 members.
That's amazing. Tell me a little bit about what it takes to put an event like that on. Tell me about what some of the preparation and planning was that went into that.
Well, Action in Montgomery is an organization that helps rearrange people and resources for the benefit of the whole community. And so what we have been doing for a year at Sligo Church is having a series of one-on-one meetings, one person talking to another person about what they're passionate about in terms of their way of life, issues in regard to the way their family lives, how it gets along in the community. And from these meetings over a period of a year, we formed little house groups where individuals would then come together as small groups and talk about some of the same things. And the result of that was an emerging agenda over the course of a year's time as to what was important to our members. And from those meetings then, we began to have meetings with our community. More one-on-one meetings, more house meetings, addressing the needs of community members and neighbors and seeing what the matches were.
And your congregation isn't the only congregation involved with AIM. How many congregations are a part of that organization?
Well, at present we're one of 28, and we have 2 other congregations that we're hoping will join soon. But the beauty of the action on October 13 was that these agenda items, these things that were very important to our congregation, were in some way important to others in these 28 other congregations too.
And those congregations also went through that same process of one-on-one meetings and finding from those meetings issues of concern within those congregations and then listening to other congregations and seeing how they hook together?
Yes, so just imagine the energy that night when all of us got together with our congregations and neighbors who were representing the neighborhoods with our congregations to hear some of their concerns being addressed to political leaders for the first time, to corporate leaders, to the dignitaries of several different denominations that were represented in the room. It was very exciting.
And so the 2 issues that were of focus that evening were housing and immigration.
Right, affordable housing for everyone in the county and bringing an INS office full service in the location of the southeastern part of Montgomery County where we have the largest concentration of immigrant population.
Now that doesn't sound like the normal issues that people talk about in the context of a church service. Is this a shift for Sligo to spend time talking about the location of an immigration office? And is that something new for you guys?
It is very new. It's a concern that we've had because a great share of our congregation are immigrants themselves or come from immigrant families, maybe second generation. But I'm not sure in the past that we've known quite how we would address this as a community of faith. Mm-hmm. And so about 2 years ago when we were first introduced to some other congregations and members of Action in Montgomery, began these one-on-one interviews, we began to see how important it could be to our congregation and also in our community to be able to share what was blossoming in our congregation, as a way to address some of these very specific needs.
How do you make the link, though, between the worship life of your congregation and this, you know, the advocacy work that you're doing through AIM?
Well, it's very simple. Jesus Christ is our example, and his first priority was always to take care of the needs of others. And so I think that that's very simple, really, as we think about what it means to be followers of Jesus in our community. It means to take care of people, to see the need, and to be loved where we live.
Now, I know there's probably several thousand congregations within the Montgomery County area. And of those, there's probably many people who hope to be following in the model of Jesus in their lives. What do you think some of the barriers are for why a congregation perhaps would decide not to join AIM? Or, you know, what is it that would prevent some from becoming part of this group?
Well, I think people have some misconceptions about what it means to work with a power base. And Action in Montgomery defines power as simply the ability to act. The reality in the world is that whenever we need to do something that isn't being done, we need to reorganize our resources, and we need to reorganize people in a different way to see that things do get done. And so I think that's one of the misconceptions, that it's a power trip and will be power over rather than the model of power with. But the other thing is too that I think there's also a misconception that groups that organize are affiliated with a particular political party.
So AIM is not? It's a nonpartisan organization?
Totally nonpartisan. And I think that was probably a concern of some of the people in our church initially when we began to talk to Action in Montgomery and think about what it would mean to be a member.
When you look towards the future now in the coming year, is that something, you think AIM is going to provide a kind of some energy in your congregation in the coming year?
Well, it already has. I mean, one of the very exciting things about being a part of Action in Montgomery is that in the process of doing these one-on-one interviews, you really develop a good tool to find the leaders in your congregation. One of the most exciting things for Sligo Church is that the people who are involved with our actions are not the people that you would typically see leading out in other ways in the church. So it gives us a tool and a way to involve people in every way in ministry.
Well, it's certainly a compelling model to all of the congregations in our community that might seek to make a connection between the needs in their congregation and the energy and the ideals that their congregation also seeks to represent. I wonder if you could just say a word about what this means to you personally as you've lived out your call at Sligo Church.
I think one of the most important things in my ministry has been able to, as a discipler, help people understand that their lives are their ministry, and the way they live their lives demonstrates their love and concern for others, as God has shown his love for them. And so it's just been a real thrill to be able to see people use their lives to meet the needs of people around them.
Well, many thanks to Pastor Rebecca Brillhart for joining me on the Coffee House. Your work with AIM is a compelling model, and we look forward to hearing great things from AIM in the coming year. I'm Heather Kirk-Davidoff, and this has been The Willing Spirit.
A short boat ride away from Smith Island lies Hollins Island, Maryland, and a cautionary tale.
Some of my ancestors used to live on Hollins Island, which is about 12 miles north of Smith Island. There was 60 homes about, and it was over 300 people lived on there. And they had stores, they had a recreation center, post office, pretty much everything you needed to run in Holland. Today, there's nothing but marsh and eroded shoreline, and the water's just swallowed it up, and now it's abandoned. There hasn't been anybody live here since 1922.
The problem is that the world's oceans are rising, getting higher each year, profoundly affecting the Chesapeake Bay and places like Hollins Island.
Due to sea level rise, I'm facing Hopefully not in my lifetime, but who knows? I'm facing all this heritage that I have on these islands, 300 years worth of heritage, and all the evidence of their existence just coming to an end. And the feeling is very sad. It will not be the Eastern Shore that I have known all my life and plan to spend the rest of my life in. I'll just love these islands.
Back on Smith Island, the last inhabited Chesapeake Island in Maryland, a similar fate is unfolding. The rate of sea level rise is accelerating.
Erosion is a big part of why we have lost a good part of our population.
Every day on his boat, Jesse Marsh sees more evidence of change all along the bay. Shores eroding, marshes drowning.
This map on my global positioning system was made about 20 years ago. The satellites give my boat's position right here and right now. As you can see, this shows my boat floating over land. There's no land here anymore, just water. And all this land has disappeared in just 20 years. It's happening that fast.